There's been a lot of controversy surrounding John Harbaugh over the last few seasons, and there's really no secret about that. But he continues to be one of the big reasons why free agents and players want to come to the Ravens. And there's another example of that happening. We talk about that, as well as Derrick Henry making an intriguing move. All that and more coming up next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. This is Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen of the day as well. We are free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Sam Njoku, Ravens Talk Pod, is back in the house today. And Sam, the draft less than a month away. It is sneaking up on us. We'll get into a little bit of draft content as we talk throughout our talking points of the day. But I still think that with the Ravens and what they have left, they've made moves, they've rounded out their roster. But at least at this point, the Ravens have made a couple of big ones, including one that we haven't talked about yet, and that is Chidobe Awuzie.
Yeah, the Ravens are still tinkering away. Every little bit helps. Some moves that we may not feel like are huge moves may end up being the move that catapults them to much success. So, offseason still rolling, EDC still working. So lots of moves left to be made for the Ravens.
And who knows? Even though the draft's less than a month away, they could make a move or two before the draft begins. And that obviously gives them, I call it, Sam, free agency freedom, gives them draft freedom, because when they make these moves, you're not pigeonholed into taking one position. We know the Ravens are a BPA team. They've been that throughout the course of their franchise history. Baltimore did, though, sign a depth cornerback, Chidobe Awuzie, formerly of the Tennessee Titans, played some time with Cincinnati, and also he started off in Dallas. Will be 30 years old by the time the season starts. But I think this move, honestly, Sam, just screams Raven. It screams Ravens, where you have a guy that has struggled with health over the course of his career, was one of the top corners in the game in Cincinnati. Baltimore saw that up close and personal for a couple of years before his ACL tear. Only 8 games for the Titans last season. So you're betting on a guy to come back and bounce back with health, but you're doing it in a role where he's corner 3. It's kind of the same conversation we had about DeAndre Hopkins, where you're not asking him to do as much as he's been asked to do over the years. He's behind Marlon, Humphrey, and Nate Wiggins. He's a physical outside corner. How did you like the move? Because you checked in on the live stream. You were in there. We talked for months about Jair Alexander. Hey, that could be the move. We talked Rashod Douglas, maybe Stephon Gilmore, but it ends up being Chidobe Awuzie.
Yeah, and some of that might be because, there hasn't been a lot of movement as far as extensions go for Derrick Henry, at least as of yet. Same thing for Lamar Jackson. So they want to get somebody who's a little cheaper, somebody who's definitely proven himself to be a capable cornerback. So definitely like the move. I understand the move is a vet minimum deal. The Ravens are going to bring somebody in that, again, they're very familiar with during this time in Cincinnati. So that's a plus on the Ravens' part. But yeah, they needed to get somebody going there. Also, you have a guy like TJ Tampa, who I think may have a resurgent year in year 2. And then the draft is coming up, and you think that the Ravens are likely to make a move in that realm during the first 3 or 4 rounds. So I like the move. There's still more work left to be done, but definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked, at least totally, if they did decide to bring in another vet. Probably not a, Jair Alexander type move. I think we both agree that's kind of over at this point. But
yeah,
they do bring in someone on another vet min deal that can compete, because right now your cornerback room is Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, Chidobe Awuzie, TJ Tampa, and Jalen Armour-Davis. The corner class is not as impressive as it's been in recent seasons, so maybe that says to Baltimore, hey, maybe it'll be a day 3 player, and then you sign one more vet and just have the battle commence from there in training camp. But Chidobe Awuzie officially signed his deal yesterday. He spoke with Garrett Downing of BaltimoreRavens.com. And he was asked kind of the process about what it was like, him sitting down, figuring out his options in free agency. And like DeAndre Hopkins said during his introductory press conference with the Ravens, Chidobe Awuzie mentioned John Harbaugh. He said, quote, the Ravens checked every box, talking with a lot of the coaches. John Harbaugh, just a man of conviction and a man of faith who can definitely tell the energy that he has. He also talked about Zach Orr, Chuck Pagano, Eric DeCosta. And then he was then followed up. Garrett asked him, well, what about John Harbaugh? How huge was Harbaugh in this process? He said it was huge. He asked questions about me. He's a man of faith. I'm a man of faith. There was just something there. There was a feeling. I'm excited to see what we can do here. He even compared it to when he was in high school trying to figure out where he was going to college. He went to college in Colorado. He said the conversations that he had there about where he was going to take that next step in his life at the time felt similar to what happened in Baltimore. So John Harbaugh stays the Ravens' top recruiter here. He's a big reason why a lot of these players want to come play for the Ravens. I know, Sam, there are a lot of fans who like John Harbaugh. There are a lot of fans who don't like John Harbaugh. It's a very controversial topic within the Ravens fan base, but he's transformed himself into a player's coach. We've seen that over the last handful of seasons. And I think it's really cool how, Harbaugh can be a guy that can convince players. They might already be like, hey, I'm leaving Baltimore, but Harbaugh can be that guy that slams the door shut and says, hey, you're not leaving here without a deal. I'm going to make sure of it because of what I can bring to the table.
Yeah, you got to love the way John Harbaugh approaches these things. And yeah, he's a man of faith just like he is. So I understand the reason behind the connection and all of that. So I'm very impressed by the way he said, because, I'm a John Harbaugh guy and he wins. He wins. Maybe not in the biggest of moments as of recently, but he wins, and he knows that he has the best chance of winning if he decides to join the Ravens, which is what Awuzie did. I just really think that, Harbaugh gets a lot of flack, but this is one of those situations where, he's a big proponent of it. I know, sure, a lot of players say that, DeAndre Hopkins, I'm sure, Harbaugh's a lot to do with it, but it's really Lamar Jackson. When it comes down to it, you want to play with Lamar. Lamar gives you the best chance to win in this head coach quarterback combo, along with Eric DeCosta, more of a trio. That team can put in some work. So definitely not a difficult decision if you want to join a defense like this, who struggled early but came back around in the second half of the season, became one of the better defenses in the league.
And he talked about the defense as well. And he actually talked about Marlon's energy. He said, seeing Marlon after he makes a play, get all that crazy energy, infectious energy. He said he's excited to be around that and also bring his own energy too. But yeah, the fact that John Harbaugh has been around as long as he has, him being in Baltimore since 2008, having the regular season success he's had over the course of his career, plus obviously early in his coaching career, the playoff success was unquestioned. Obviously, as you mentioned, it's been recently where the teams have come up short. And John Harbaugh does have his faults. Every coach does. And, we talk about those here on Locked On Ravens. But at the same time, I think that people like John Harbaugh, at least players do, for multiple different reasons, including the fact that he's someone that you want to go to war for every time you step out on that field. He backs his players. He stands up for his players. He has relationships with his players. I know, Sam, the typical hot coaching candidate these days is either a young, bright offensive mind or a young, bright defensive mind, right? Coaches, they're getting younger in age. Obviously, Mike Macdonald, who left Baltimore, is a key example of that. And honestly, we saw some older coaches get back in the game this year, like a Pete Carroll and a Mike Vrabel and et cetera. But I think that, again, players value the fact that John Harbaugh has the experience and has brought the Ravens to multiple championship games, a Super Bowl win. And while, again, the playoff success hasn't been recent, something Chidobe Awuzie did say was, quote, I already knew about this organization. This is a storied organization, a storied franchise that our brother was actually a fan of growing up. So we know a lot about the Ravens. There's a standard and a culture to uphold. And when you talk about that, since 2008, John Harbaugh has been a huge part of instilling that culture and getting the Ravens to where they are as one of the most storied franchises in the NFL right now.
Oh, yeah. And, there's two types of players in the league. And I mention this all the time. There's players who are built for it and those who are not. Some people can't handle the criticism and the expectations that are levied on you when you are a Baltimore Raven under John Harbaugh, i.e. Deontay Johnson a few months ago. And then you got a guy like Chidobe who knows the storied history of this franchise, who understands that, even though he's welcome here, there is that level of expectations with this team, with this defense that comes with the territory. So it's very good that he has that mindset. It's going to serve him well. There may be an opportunity for him to make a play or two with this defense, especially the way he played during his limited opportunities in Tennessee and in Cincinnati. There's some some get to this guy. I think that he's an underrated signing, vet minimum, which is such a great value for a guy like this. And again, a lot more to come for the Ravens. I would not be surprised if they bring in another corner, but man, they have a decent set of corners available to them. They just need to add a little more to the pot.
And we talk about it. Eric DeCosta wins again. He was cut from Tennessee, which means no comp.
No comp.
You get to keep your picks and you get to get as many swings as you want, because when you were the Baltimore Ravens, you value those comp pick selections. Awuzie also ended up talking about the atmosphere, both in the stadium and just the city in general of Baltimore. He said, quote, "I remember when I came here to play one game, it was a Sunday night game, just a crowd. It's crazy. This place is like a dungeon. It feels ominous. The energy was crazy. That played a huge part. Just seeing how the town and the city of Baltimore rally around the team, the owners, front office, everybody takes a lot of care of the players too." And that is the reputation that Baltimore has. I know that some of the grades on the NFLPA player survey were a little shocking when it came to the kind of how low they were. But when you think Baltimore, you think about, one, the standard and the culture that Awuzie mentioned, but also about how they treat the players off of the field, how it is a family-oriented situation in Baltimore for a lot of these guys. And the fact that, yes, the city is so passionate, and that those Sunday night games in Baltimore, those primetime matchups, you get the all black uniforms coming out, you get that ominous feeling. Derrick Henry talked about that when he was in Tennessee, how he thought that playoff game when the Ravens lost to Tennessee back in 2019, 2020, he thought that atmosphere is one of the best he was ever in. So players take note of that too. I know that some people might not think that's a huge part of it, but players they want energy to feed off of. In Baltimore, the city, the fans, they give that energy.
I love primetime games in Baltimore. And that's a great analogy that he used, calling it a dungeon, because it definitely feels like a medieval dungeon when you're going in there. You don't know what you expect. Gladiator is playing all of this atmospheric energy from the fans as well as the players. Yeah, it's huge. And I would love to play for Baltimore. If I was a football player, this would be the number one place I'd want to play. And that's because I'm a Ravens fan or a Baltimore resident, but just because of the atmosphere. I've been to a lot of games in a lot of cities, and no one touches the atmosphere of a Sunday night game here in Baltimore. It's second to none. So I understand where Derrick Henry's coming from, and all these other players that are going to come in are going to get to feel that energy for the Ravens for years to come, hopefully.
Yeah, it's exciting. And again, while Chidobe Awuzie is not this like big, massive Jair Alexander type move, I do think it is a typical Ravens move that, again, could pay dividends down the line. And coming up, we'll continue our conversation about what Chidobe Awuzie had to say, as well as Derrick Henry making an intriguing move and whether his contract extension needs to happen sooner now that Mark Andrews and that roster bonus is picked up. So be sure to stay tuned. We got a lot coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. We are back, Locked On Ravens. Sam Njoku, Kevin Oestreicher. We're still talking with you here on this Purple Friday edition of the show. Sam, something I thought was really intriguing about the Chidobe Awuzie situation in general was the fact that he's still getting paid by Tennessee. Tennessee moved off of him because they have guys at corner that they feel like can play over him, and they're paying L'Jarius Sneed a whole lot of money. And honestly, that didn't look so great in year one for Tennessee. So you can't cut L'Jarius Sneed. That contract is too big. They had an out with Chidobe Awuzie, and they took that. But that means they're paying him $7.5 million this season. It reminds me of the Russell Wilson situation, where Russ got cut by Denver, and he's getting paid this boatload of money. So he says to himself, hey, let me go to a place where I can resurrect my value a little bit, have a good shot at winning, stable organization. He chooses Pittsburgh on essentially a minimum contract there. He essentially gives Pittsburgh a break by not making them pay all that money. It's similar to me with Awuzie, because I think he kind of sat down and said, I'm getting paid this money by Tennessee this season. I can get paid a minimum deal. I can play for an organization that I have a shot at winning a Super Bowl for. And the Ravens are notoriously known, not every single example of this is true, but for the most part, reviving careers of veterans and giving them a good way to say, hey, I had a great year in Baltimore this past season. Sign me up for a bigger deal. I think Awuzie sees this as a chance to maybe resurrect his value while getting paid by two different teams. I'm not sure this move happens if there was no money being paid to Awuzie by Tennessee.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. It wouldn't have happened. But yeah, to your point, Kyle Van Noy, Jadeveon Clowney a few years back, these guys were in the downward end of their careers, at least to some, based on their performance. And then come to Baltimore, come to this defense, and because of the way the scheme is set up, because of the way these Ravens players play, it revitalizes your career. So yeah, this is a huge, it's not much of a gamble on his part or the Ravens' part. It's a win-win situation. So if he needs to have a great year, if he bounces back and becomes that third corner that the Ravens are looking for, he could be looking for another contract extension and continuing to get paid. So this is and what better defense to play than this defense who already have Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, and Nate Wiggins. It's just a great deal for the Ravens. Another example of why Eric DeCosta is one of the best GMs in the league.
Yeah, I like this move a lot. I gave it a B+ on the live stream. Again, it's not a move that's going to knock your socks off or anything like that, but still one that I think can provide plenty of value. Let's move on to Derrick Henry, though. He made an intriguing move. For those that don't know, Derrick Henry ended up selling his Dallas home, and there's speculation. I don't think it's been confirmed anymore, but there's speculation that he might be looking in the Baltimore, D.C. area. So if that is the case, obviously signals he's going to be in Baltimore long-term, at least you hope. That's the hope. There's been no extension yet. Hopefully that comes soon. But to you, Sam, the extension that Saquon Barkley signed is obviously going to shift around how this extension for Derrick Henry looks. We've talked about that, you and I, in the past. But do you think with Mark Andrews having his $4 million roster bonus picked up, that is now guaranteed on the roster, does the Derrick Henry extension need to happen sooner to free up more cap space for the Ravens to operate? Because they've gotten creative. Obviously, Michael Pierce, who was retiring, that is not going to come on the books for them until June 1st. They've freed up money now and after June 1st. They've made a couple of other intriguing moves as well, like the Marlon Humphrey max restructure. But does their extension clock accelerate because of the Mark Andrews situation to free up some more money, or do you think that it's just going to happen when it happens?
I'm 50-50 on it. At one point, yes, you would like to get the extension done for Derrick Henry because of, again, that signing bonus pickup by Mark Andrews, which I'm not totally a fan of, as well as, the fact that Lamar Jackson's contract hasn't been restructured or extended. It's coming, I believe, this offseason. It's just a matter of when. So, yeah, you want to get Derrick Henry extended. But the other reason is you don't want him to go into the last year of his deal, have a ball-out campaign a la what happened with T. Higgins and the Bengals, and you're forced to pay him even more money. I know he's on the downward trend of his career. Running backs around his age aren't really, getting paid like that. But you don't want to take that chance. So you much rather get it done now. Definitely save yourself up some roster, cap space to get another DN, perhaps maybe another safety via free agency to work with Kyle Hamilton or Darius Washington, who looks like he'll probably be staying. So yeah, I think the extension has to happen. Restructuring, whatever else supersedes that. But the Derrick Henry extension has to get done. I think it will get done. It's just a matter of working out the numbers.
I'm just going to say this in the only way that I really know how. Derrick Henry is just different. Yeah. He's just different. That's all I can say. Where you're exactly right. Like running backs at this age, you hit that 30 number and everybody starts to get scared about downward production and downward trends. But we know that Henry takes absolutely incredible care of his body. And he's somebody that I think, to me, you love the fact that he could probably go for another 5 seasons. And he's going to be what? Is he going to be 32 by the time the season starts? I know he's right around there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. So by the time the season starts, he's going to be someone that, yes, he'll be up there in age. He'll be getting older. But at this point, so he just turned 31. So his birthday's in January. He'll be 32 right around the time the playoffs start. So even a little younger than I thought he was. But at the end of the day, you're right, where the age of running backs having such low positional value, I think we're coming to an end of that, especially because not only is Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, they've both worked very hard in terms of repairing the image of running backs, but you're even starting to see guys continue to get picked high in the draft. Like Ashton Genty is going to go very high in this draft. I know, Sam, that's your dream for Baltimore, but you can go as high as like 6 to Las Vegas. Like I can see that happening. The running back position is regaining value. So I think it's important to re-sign Derrick Henry or extend Derrick Henry for the sake of just getting some cap space. You don't want to, just pinch pennies over 1 million today to lose out on 5 million tomorrow because of how that whole situation works. So I think Henry's intriguing. The running back room also, just in general, I know we've talked about it, Sam. I just don't know what they're going to do. Not in the fact of they don't have the guys on the roster, because they do, but they almost have too many guys on the roster. And with 11 draft picks, they might even add a fifth. I don't know. Henry is safe. Justice Hill is safe. Keaton Mitchell has to be safe. I don't think there's a world where they get rid of him. Rashid Ali, I know that's your guy, but that could go 50-50. And then with the way that this running back class is structured, I don't know what they do, because 4 running backs always seems like it's too much to me. I mean, they could work with it, but in my opinion, I don't really know if Rashid Ali is a guy that stays. If they draft a running back, well, that's a rookie. You're probably going to keep him on the roster. I think it'd be a waste of a draft pick not to. How do you kind of see this running back room shaking out outside of Derrick Henry and Justice Hill? Because I think we all know that those two guys are the ones that are going to get the most run this year.
Well, Keaton Mitchell didn't look as great this past season, and that's a little bit due to because he just suffered an ACL tear and just coming back from that. Ali, I liked him coming out of Marshall, but hasn't really shown much this year. Of course, he's a rookie last season, so I don't really, put that much pressure on him. But Justice Hill is another guy, great. Derrick Henry, obviously awesome. So, yeah, the Ravens have 4 great running backs, and we'll see what happens. I mentioned the Ashton Jenny thing because, I'm a Genty guy, but obviously they're not going to get him. They may get a depth guy in the later rounds of this upcoming draft, and then you have a conversation and leave it up to, if they really love a guy, leave it up to training camp to see who makes it out. But I think they're really good with 4 running backs right now. And I'd be surprised if they select a guy, but you know how Eric DeCosta works. It doesn't matter how much talent you got in there. The best player comes out. It's a future problem. Getting the talent in right now is what they really aim to do. So would surprise me if they got a running back, honestly, but at the same time, I want it because of the way they draft here in Baltimore. So we'll see, but I do like the running back room right now. Definitely different from the tight end room that the Ravens have, where they have 3 guys who are most likely going to be, entering the next offseason without a deal in place.
I think Keaton Mitchell's the most intriguing option that they have. I mean, obviously, Derrick Henry and Justice Hill are going to get theirs, but coming off of the injury, sometimes it just takes time. It just takes a year for a guy to trust his body fully and feel the full, oh, hey, I'm back now. I don't have to worry about the knee. I don't have to worry about cutting here or jumping there. And it's different for every player. And I think that Keaton, yes, he didn't get as many opportunities last season. I would have liked to see him get more. And I think that he should get more next year because he just adds a different element to the offense that I feel like is really useful. And we saw was really useful back in 2023. But I just think with the way the roster is going to be structured, can you afford to keep 4 running backs is going to be the main question. Like if you need an extra offensive lineman space or an extra edge rusher space, where if they sign a vet and draft another guy at edge, they're going to have 7 edge rushers on their roster. And then you say, well, what happens is that David Ajabo is the odd man left out. Do they trade Lafayette on draft night? Because remember, no one knew Marquise Brown was getting traded on draft night. And then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, he was gone. So is that another move that the Ravens could make? There are just so many valuable roster spots and premium positions. Running back could be one of those spots where you chop off a guy on the roster like a Rashid Ali to say, hey, let's go get an extra offensive lineman spot or an extra cornerback spot, because we know you can never have enough of those guys. So I would like to see the Derrick Henry extension get agreed to, ideally before the draft, but I feel like before the end of the offseason is probably the realistic timeline. And that's probably for both sides too. That's probably when they want to get it done, but we know these things can take time. That's just how it goes at the NFL level. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about the biggest moves left for Baltimore and if there are any of the Ravens free agents left that they should re-sign. So stay tuned. We got a lot coming up on Locked On Ravens. Back here, Locked On Ravens, Sam Njoku, Kevin Oestreicher, Bristol diving into Ravens content with you on this Friday edition of the show. Might have a bonus episode this weekend. Not exactly sure yet. I'm still debating the headlines. There have been a lot of them this week, so we'll figure that out as the weekend goes on. But this show, Sam, we've talked a lot about John Harbaugh. We've talked a lot about Derrick Henry. Let's move into some of the biggest moves that you think are left for the Ravens. Now, this could be positionally in terms of, is safety at the top of your board now? Or is edge, defensive line, are they at the top of your board? Is that making a trade? Is that the draft? Where are you kind of shifting your focus for Baltimore now as we've been through almost 3 weeks of free agency?
Yeah, it's been a thought process because a lot of moves that I thought would have been made weren't made. A lot of moves that I thought wouldn't be made were made. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic that the Ravens have right now. A good problem because the Ravens, in my opinion, because of the moves that the Eagles made and the lack of moves the Chiefs made, and of course the Bengals not making any moves regarding anything besides T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, the Ravens, I think, have the best roster in the league right now. So they have a very interesting dilemma that they find themselves in. So I think, for me, safety would be a great addition. I think that's the one free agency move that I would like the Ravens to make, just to make Kyle Hamilton more dangerous, more versatile. Having him being a versatile safety does so much for this defense pre-snap that it would be a shame if the Ravens didn't at least make an attempt at another free agent safety. I think they do prior to the draft. But there's a lot of trades within the organization that you talked about that may actually happen due to depth. One is the edge room. I mean, Odafe Oweh, last year of his deal. We mentioned Marcus Brown. Marquise Brown, I should say, is a guy that we didn't expect to get traded. He did get traded in the draft. Odafe Oweh, I think he's reached his ceiling as an edge rusher. Who knows? If they're not able to convince themselves that a long-term extension is going to happen, they may use him and trade him to get another piece or to make room for an edge rusher via the draft. Don't be surprised by that. The tight end room. You got Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and Charlie Kolar, all three in the last year of the deal that we mentioned earlier in the show. Mark Andrews, even though he picked up that $4 million bonus, he still is a $7 million savings if he's released or traded. So if the draft comes along and a team that was looking at a tight end doesn't get their tight end via draft, there may be an implication where Mark Andrews may be traded during the draft. So there's a lot of situations where I think the Ravens can plug in and move pieces and still be a comparable franchise. But other than safety and corner, I think interior line is definitely something to pay attention to. I think the Ravens would be okay with Voorhees and Falele as your interior lineman, but there's a way to improve that offensive line. Don't worry about saving face Harbaugh. Just get a better talent out there. Get some guys that can complement Tyler Linderbaum very well. Tyler Linderbaum was actually do a lot with limited experience on both of his sides. So I think interior line is one where they can make a move. Maybe early in the draft, Tyler Booker looks very enticing at the end of the first round, but a lot of decisions the Ravens need to make. But they're small, minuscule decisions, but could be a huge impact come postseason time.
Yeah, and I'm also looking at the defensive line as well. I know I've talked about that a lot on the show, where I think edge room wise and defensive line wise, you have four guys out of the entire room, both of them combined, that you can rely on. It's Travis Jones and Nnamdi Madubuike on the interior, and Odafe Oweh and Kyle Van Noy at the edge guys. And I kind of chalked it up as, if you want to, Odafe Oweh has been somewhat inconsistent over the course of his career. So if you want to say they have 3.5 consistent options, I would even give that to you too. But that's why when you talk about a guy like a Zadarius Smith or Matt Judon or Calais Campbell or just a high-level rookie, what happens if Kyle Van Noy goes down and has to miss a month and, the Ravens don't address that position at all? You're in a really tough spot because you're going to have to rely on a Tavius Robinson or a Jabo or Adisa Isaac to step up alongside Odafe Oweh. And while I'm not saying that's impossible, it certainly is a realm that they could go and step up. It's kind of like what we talk about Chidobe Awuzie, where you have that veteran buffer behind the young or in front of the young guy now, where you're not completely relying. Like Trenton Simpson, they didn't really have that last season. They said, all right, Trenton Simpson is going to be the guy next to Roquan. And then clearly it didn't work out. And while Chris Board had some good games, Malik Harrison was up and down and he had good and bad moments, you kind of wish they had a third linebacker that could have stepped in immediately and just been that plug and play guy. So that to me is a really intriguing part of it. There are also some free agents that the Ravens still have available. They've obviously brought back Ronnie Stanley, Patrick Ricard, Tylan Wallace. But I think you look at the rest of the guys available. Deontay Johnson, which I really don't even think we have to talk about. Same with Marcus Williams. But then you have Trey White, Arthur Millette, who they cut. So I don't really think that's maybe on a minimum deal, less cap hit, but I don't think that's a thing. Nelson Aguilar, Josh Johnson, Brent Urban, Deontay Hardy, Christian Welch, Trayvon Mullen, Christian Matthew, and Owen Wright. If I'm being honest, Sam, the only guy I could see back is Trey White, and that's us talking about if they want to bring back a guy who was really solid for them since they acquired him in trade from Los Angeles. They might still be looking to add a vet corner. I think that move does make a lot of sense. Other than that, though, I see nobody. I mean, maybe Brent Urban if he wants to play one more season, but I think Baltimore might be trying to get an upgrade from what Brent Urban brings to them. I really think it's Trey White, and that's it. If it's not Trey White, I don't think they're bringing anybody back.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they brought anybody back. Trey White, is a guy who they could have brought back instead of Chidobe, but they decided to go his route. But, Trey White's a guy who's comfortable with the system. He's shown flashes, but there's a reason why he's not back, most likely because maybe he's looking for a better deal. Maybe he's waiting around for an injury. Sometimes veterans like to do that. But, yeah, I agree with you. Trey White's probably the most likely candidate to come back, followed by Brent Urban and maybe even Nelson Agholor, a guy who, didn't have too much of a great season in 2024, but 2023 might be good enough for the Ravens to decide, okay, well, we know he's great at blocking as a receiver, so maybe take another chance at him if we don't get the guy we're looking for in the draft. But Nelson Agholor is a guy that you can wait until after the draft before making that type of decision. But to your point, I think Trey White's probably the most likely, but if I had to guess, I'd say none of them get brought back.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think that's a testament to, one, the Ravens didn't have a lot of big free agents this year, and I think that's it feels so good not to have to go through that process again. I mean, we've been dealing with that for last handful of seasons, especially last year. Last year was a different type of free agency list and coach. Like, they lost coaches every single day. Like, it was brutal, loss after loss after loss. But that's where I continue to say you're starting from a point of where you ended last season without a lot of loss. It was minimal loss. So now you're able to build upon that. I think you have upgraded, because I look at it this way. Some people aren't happy about the DeAndre Hopkins move. Some people aren't happy about the Chidobe Awuzie move. I look at it this way. DeAndre Hopkins is a massive upgrade over Nelson Agholor at wide receiver 3. Just in a vacuum, 1-for-1. I think that's a big upgrade. Chidobe Awuzie, I think, first of all, because Brandon Stevens started as cornerback 2, Nate Wiggins is night and day from what Brandon Stevens was as corner 2 last season. And I think the Chidobe Awuzie gives you an upgrade over Brandon Stevens as well, because, one, he can turn his head around for the ball, which is a very valued skill. And two, I just think that when he is healthy, he can be better. I think Brandon Stevens has the higher ceiling, but I think the Ravens need the higher floor that Chidobe Awuzie brings to the table. Do you think, Sam, that Chidobe Awuzie is an upgrade over Brandon Stevens here?
Who would think otherwise? I mean, have you had fans on your show come on the comments and say that he's not an upgrade over Brandon Stevens? Stevens was the second worst cornerback in terms of giving up passing yards in the league last year. It's no question. They could have brought you in and I would have said, well, you give him some time with the coaching staff, you may have something there. So, yeah, I think he's a definite upgrade. One, he has the skill set. We know that. We've seen him in action. He's done it. And two, the only issue with him is staying healthy. Of course, that is the one knock on him. But when he's healthy, he's a decent corner. You don't need all pro corners all over the field. You would love that, but having somebody who knows what he's doing, who knows he's going to be targeted and not bend or break under pressure is something that's a commodity, I think, for the Ravens. So I think he's a very good vet corner to add to your defense, and I think they want to be. I'd be shocked if there's a loss in talent with the acquisition of him and the loss of Brandon Stevens. There's not a world that I live in where I can say that Brandon Stevens is a huge loss with the addition of Awuzie. That's not it. It's not it. Sorry.
And I wouldn't be shocked if Brandon Stevens plays better on the Jets. Just a different situation, but at the same time,
can't be worse than this.
I mean, I'll tell you what. I mean, I hope not, for the sake of the Jets. I mean, that would be pretty. And Sauce Gardner wouldn't be happy about it either. I'll tell you that. He would have something to say. We know that Sauce is very vocal. So I just feel like Brandon Stevens, it wasn't the right fit anymore. I think the Ravens jerked him around too much early in his career. Corner safety. And then finally, people don't remember about Brandon Stevens, Sam. I'm not sure, how many people do. He was supposed to play safety in 2023. There were so many injuries at corner that year. He was forced back at corner, and then all of a sudden he was really good, and Baltimore was like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is where he's playing now. They couldn't figure out what he was. And then I guess kind of by necessity, they figured it out. But that's kind of the problem you see with a lot of versatile pieces these days is teams just don't, like Isaiah Simmons. The Cardinals couldn't figure him out. And he has not been good. And I don't even know he was on the Giants last year. I'm not sure if he's even in the league anymore. It can be tough with those versatile pieces. So I think that Baltimore, while yes, they love the positionless defense, they love moving guys around, it shouldn't be a guy switching positions every single season. And I think for Baltimore, Chidobe Awuzie will be an upgrade over Brandon Stevens. There really is no question about that in my mind. But Sam, I appreciate you as always. Thank you for hopping on, talking Ravens football with me as always. Tell people where they can find you and what you're working on. It still to me is crazy. The draft is under a month away. It feels like, just yesterday the Ravens were in the divisional round. We were talking about how they were going to beat the Bills, and then, of course, didn't go that way.
Yeah, let's make sure that doesn't happen again. I don't think I could take another loss to the Bills or the Chiefs or the Bengals or anybody else. So yeah, let's make sure that doesn't happen. But yeah, you can find me on Ravens Talk Podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. We'll have an episode out next week, summarizing the free agency period and then looking ahead to the NFL draft for the Ravens. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok at Ravens Talk Pod, where we talk football all day long.
You know the drill. Sam knows his stuff. He does great work. Be sure, the links in the description down below. Be sure to follow him, subscribe to all that he does. Sam, appreciate you as always. And thank you to everybody who watched, listened to Locked On Ravens today. Maybe a bonus episode tomorrow. Not sure. We'll see where the headlines take us. So be sure to stay tuned. And I'll see you back here soon on Locked On Ravens.